الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear brothers and sister, singular, I don't normally wear a tie, but today I'm abnormally dressed in a neat and quite flashy manner, which I think is a tribute to the legend that we're going to talk about today, because this is one of the features of Malcolm X, and actually it's one of the features of that organization that he once worked for, Nation of Islam. They used to wear suits, black tie, very tidily, very neatly, almost like a uniform, to denote their dignity and their self-discipline. So I'm trying to tribute that as well, and hopefully I can never get to the what's that called? Verbal ability and delivery of Malcolm X, but I'll try to introduce this person as best as I can, inshallah. So, one thing that's quite special about Islam is that it attracts people from so diverse backgrounds. Two persons can be extremely different in their upbringing, in their cultural background, in their social environment, in their time, in their beliefs, but they can all come back to La ilaha illallah, to the fundamental beliefs of Islam. And Islam can be something that inspire these different people, although they are so different, but Islam becomes a source of inspiration and a source of nourishing enrichment to these different people. So last time we talked about Muhammad Madian, rahimahullah, who was a Chinese, who grew up in a time when China was very weak. And that is very, very different from the person that we're going to introduce today, Malcolm X. He's from a different time, a different country, he's from a different race. He had a very different story. Muhammad Madian, you can say, is a born scholar. He was a straight A student since primary school. But Malcolm X was a robber and a hustler and Detroit rat, someone on the street when he was young. So they are very different, but both of them are, we have African brothers, mashallah. The pressure is on, I feel like I have to, yes. I feel like I have to gradually fine-tune my accent to be more Malcolm-ish. And the title for today, The Real Black Panther. When I gave this name to Brother Adil, I was not intending for you to build a mental connection with the Marvel movie. Is it Marvel?
Yes.
The Marvel movie, a fictional figure in a far African lost kingdom that has superpowers. That was not my intention. The title, Black Panther, was used in the book of Alex Haley, the autobiography of Malcolm X. That's more than 60 years ago, more than half a century ago, before Wakanda Forever appeared in this world. And I'll read this part, why he was described as a Black Panther. It's actually, so Malcolm X, after going through so many experiences, eventually actually just 4 or 5 years before he was assassinated, he decided that I want to record everything that happened in my life. So he went to Alex Haley. Actually, Alex Haley approached him at first. The first time he refused. He said, I don't want people to know about my stories. But the second time, and this is also sort of, when you get close to Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can sort of get certain a portion of revelation, a portion of wahi, that kind of divine inspiration. So when he approached the later stage of his life, he knew that something's going to happen soon. He actually told the press, the press asked him, now that you have ruptured and severed your relationship with this cult, Nation of Islam, do you think your life will be in danger because of what they may do to you? He said, oh, I'm probably a dead man already. He had that feeling. So he went to Alex Haley the second time and he said, you know what, let's do it. Let's write this book. Let me record every single thing that happened to me and every single thought I've ever had, because it will be valuable to other people who are similar. So he composed this book. It's his autobiography. So every word was actually composed by him, but it was recorded by Alex Haley because he was too busy. So in a week, they would meet 2 times, sometimes 3 times. He would verbally narrate to Alex Haley his stories, and the author Alex Haley will record it, and then later on rephrase them, or actually verbatim record them and put them in a book form. So it's the first time that they officially met and agreed to do this book. Malcolm X came with some documents. They wanted to sign some papers, maybe a contract, a book contract. And Malcolm X just came to Alex Haley's house and sat down for a cup of tea. And there was, I didn't find out who this Mrs. Handler is, but from the context, I was guessing that she's just like a domestic helper in Alex Haley's house. She was just like a maid, okay, someone working for Alex Haley. So she was observing the conversation. She was observing these two black men, very different two black men talking with each other. Their attitudes are different, and their personalities are very different. So Mrs. Handler, after this long conversation, Malcolm X left. Alex Haley said Mrs. Handler was quiet and thoughtful after Malcolm's departure. Looking up suddenly, she said, "You know, it was like having tea with a Black Panther." And Alex Haley, further explained, "The description startled me. The Black Panther is an aristocrat in animal kingdom." Do you know what is an aristocrat? It's like a higher class, someone with dignity and honor, honorable class. So the Black Panther is an aristocrat in the animal kingdom. He is beautiful, he's dangerous. As a man, Malcolm X had the physical bearing and the inner self-confidence of a born aristocrat. And he was potentially dangerous. No man in our time aroused fear and hatred in the white man as did Malcolm, because in him the white man sensed an implacable foe who could not be had for any price. A man unreservedly committed to the cause of liberating the black man in American society rather than integrating the black man into that society. So that's why he was described as a Black Panther. He had that kind of power and passion and willpower and determination. He can never be tamed in a way, just like a Black Panther. So this term was used to describe him much earlier than the video. So I say he's the real Black Panther. And through this talk, inshallah, we will see some of the qualities as shown in his life. So, his life has been talked a lot about by different speakers, and his life influenced many individuals that we are familiar with today. For example, in the United States, there is an imam, also African American. His name is, I think, Sheikh Wahaj, something Dean Wahaj, I forgot. He's African American, and he's an imam in the United States. Siraj Wahaj, yes, exactly. Imam Siraj Wahaj. He was among you can see the senior imams of the American society. All of these young imams, like Imam Sheikh Omar Suleiman, Imam Suhaib Wab, they all took guidance and mentoring from Sheikh Siraj Wahaj. And he said, "I entered Islam because of Malcolm X." We also know of Muhammad Ali, the boxer. He got to know Islam because of Malcolm X. We know Omar Suleiman is heavily influenced by Malcolm X. He would mention many times in his talk that one of his favorite books is the autobiography of Malcolm X. And you see Sheikh Omar Suleiman as a very politically active person. He's always protesting, going on the street, fighting for the rights and justice of people. He even led a protest for the Chinese Muslims just a few months ago. He led the protest against sometimes things that are not directly related to Muslims. For example, the separation. He came here, right? No, he never came to Hong Kong. So Sheikh Omar Suleiman, he actually took a lot of influence from Malcolm X. He learned a lot from Malcolm X. So just by the impact that we can see in people and in the American society, we can already sense how great a man was Malcolm X. Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, brother Malcolm X. And let's try to go through his life in a chronologic manner, but I will stop at the important critical points, and I'll add some comments, inshallah. He was born in 1925, so that's almost 100 years ago, almost a century ago, 1925. And he was born, his real family name was Little. His name was Malcolm Little. And he was born in Nebraska, and he was the 7th children of his father, Earl Louis Little. And his father actually was also sort of a preacher. His father was a Christian, a Baptist Christian, and his father already took a lot of influence from the black nationalism movement back then. So his father was already passionate about how do we uplift the social status of the black people in America. And when he was growing up, the places that they lived, Wisconsin at first, Nebraska, and then Wisconsin, and then Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, they spent many years there. All of these places were not friendly at all to African Americans. So these were the places where even the African Americans, the black people, they would feel ashamed of being black. This was the social environment back then. So, white neighborhood, they were basically the only black family in a whole neighborhood, in a whole community. And obviously, you can imagine they faced a lot of persecutions and disruptions in their life. For example, their house was burned down once for no reason at all. And Malcolm X said, obviously, it was a man-made artificial accident. Someone set our house on fire. But then the firefighting car, or at that time, it was just, the firefighting people, they didn't come because it was a black family. It's not worth saving. Just let it burn. That was the social environment. And his father was actually the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. They were frequent visitors to their family. They wanted to chase them out of the city and the neighborhood. They wanted them to leave. But his father was also a very militant person. His father has a pistol, has a gun, and every time these people come, he would show them the gun. He would stand up for his rights, and he would actually scare them away. But it didn't last long until his father was killed in what police term a streetcar accident. So the police, they claim that it's an accident because he was actually killed by a tram on the street. But nobody can be killed by a tram because the tram is so slow. And Erlito was a very strong man at the time. There was no logical reason why he would be standing on the tram line and just be run over. So obviously, according to Malcolm X, it was the Ku Klux Klan who actually murdered his father in this very brutal and cruel way. So you can imagine Malcolm X as the seventh and not the youngest, but one of the youngest children. He was terrified by this childhood. His childhood was a very tough one. And then his mother now has the responsibility of raising so many children, right? 8, 9 children, just only by herself in a white neighborhood, and you can imagine how hard it is. So eventually, the state welfare department started coming to visit and telling the mother that, you know what, you're not going to be able to raise them. Why don't you just let us take them away and we'll send them to foster homes? They will live a better life. It's better off than with you. With you, they're just starving. So they started putting pressure on his mother, and eventually, actually, before the final tragedy, Malcolm's mother actually found another man, and they were dating for some time. So she actually started feeling better about life again. Now she has another one to rely on, another man to actually take help and support from. But this man, after seeing the situation of the family, especially the number of children, he eventually got threatened by the prospect of the future, and he left without any message. So he just left their mother, and it's understandable. If you go to a family and you know that to be with this woman means that I have to feed 7 children, and he himself is just a normal, working class man, it's a lot of pressure. So he left. But his departure, his leaving without any message, was a major strike on Malcolm's mother's mental health. So eventually, she actually started talking to herself. She started becoming less responsive to things. She started losing senses to the surrounding environment. So the state welfare department had more reasons to suggest that, okay, you have no right to take care of these children anymore. They started using words like crazy. Okay, this woman is crazy, and she doesn't get to raise these children. So one by one, they took these children away from the mother, and the mother was eventually actually sent to a mental health hospital, and she stayed there for 26 years until she passed away. Although her children would frequently visit her, Malcolm also frequently visited her, at least for the teenage years. But after all, we can say that the ending of his father and mother are quite tragic, are quite uncomfortable to know. And Malcolm was then sent to a foster home. This was in, let me see. So in 1938, his mother's name is Louise Leto. So Louise Leto is diagnosed as mentally ill and sent to the state mental hospital, and she stayed there for 26 years. So the children were dispersed and sent to various foster families. Malcolm was sent to a juvenile home. It's like a prison home. So he doesn't have much liberty. He doesn't have much freedom. He was sent there to be trained in the nearly all-white community of Mason, Michigan. So he was the only black child in his school at the time. But he was very smart. He earned straight A's, and he was elected as the president of his 8th grade class. He was better than his white classmates in every single subject, and teachers actually liked him. So he was not oppressed in this school. He actually felt comfortable in this school. But the thing is, the society was in a way that sometimes what we now think as totally inappropriate and racist and unacceptable back then was normal. Nobody thinks of it as problematic. For example, the following conversation happened when Malcolm was 15 years old, I believe. It's on page, let me see, page 38. So the first time he actually developed an individual sense of hatred against the white people, an individual kind of sense of injustice and unfairness about the American society was on page 38. Wait, I'm referring to this book. And by the way, if you haven't read this book, I strongly recommend this book to you. Because it's just so profound. It doesn't only tell you about Islam. It tells you about the American society. It tells you about race relations. It tells you about world history. It tells you about individual development. So many things that you can learn from in Malcolm X's book. So on page 38, okay, when his class teacher, Mr. Ostrowski, asked him, Malcolm, you're already you're mature enough. You ought to be thinking about a career. Have you been giving it thought? What do you want to do in the future, basically? And he said, the truth is I hadn't. I never have figured out why I told him. He said, well, yes, sir. I've been thinking I'd like to be a lawyer. He said he wants to be a lawyer. And judging from what he did later on, he's very suitable to be a lawyer. He's very good at speaking, and he's very rational, and his mind is very fast. He could be a lawyer. If it's in our age, if he's in my school, we would be like, that suits you very well. Go for it, brother. You're going to be a very good lawyer. That's normal. But back then, he said Lansing certainly had no Negro lawyers or doctors either. In those days, to hold up an image I might have aspired to, all I really knew for certain was that a lawyer didn't wash dishes as I was doing. So he wanted to do something more. Mr. Ostrowski looked surprised, I remember, and leaned back in his chair and clapped his hands behind his head. He kind of half smiled and said, and half smile means this is not offensive. To him, this is normal to say. Malcolm, one of life's first needs is for us to be realistic. Don't misunderstand me now. We all here like you, you know that. But you've got to be realistic about being N-word. A lawyer, that's no realistic goal for an N-word. You need to think about something you can be. You're good with your hands, making things. Everybody admires your carpentry, shop work. Why don't you plan on carpentry? People like you as a person. You got all kinds of work. Can you imagine being a teenager and told by your teacher, and you are the best in your school, and your teacher tells you, why don't you do carpentry? Why don't you do something with your hands? Being a lawyer is not realistic to you. And this is very, very damaging from a psychological perspective to a young child. You cannot say this to a child. Even, in our school, sometimes as teachers, we got so frustrated. And we're like, what can you do in the future? After 5 seconds, we have to apologize. You can be everything in the future. This has become the political correctness. You cannot take away the hope from the children. But that's what his class teacher did. So starting from this time, actually, it already made an impact on his personality. He stopped talking to people around him. He started to feel that these white people never wanted goodness for me. These white people are all plotting against me to limit me, to prevent me from being something great, and I don't want to be close to them anymore. And he started being more introverted as a teenager, and even his foster family started feeling the difference, and they were like, what happened to you? What's wrong? He would say, nothing wrong, Mrs. Swirling. And then eventually the State Department actually took him to another house for his custodianship. But eventually he was taken to Boston, and his half-sister Ella. So his father married twice. So Ella is a sister from his father's first marriage, and he's a son from the second marriage. But this half sister Ella, according to him, was the first black person that he met who is actually proud to be black. And you see, sometimes the impact of one person can lay a foundation for you, who you can be in the future. So this Ella was very proud to be black, and he was very cheerful. He was a happy person. He was positive. This was different from everything that Malcolm has seen. So he was taken to be with Ella, this half-sister, who's much older than him, to Boston. And this is why I personally feel quite connected to Malcolm X, because although I've only been in the US for half a year, but I was in Boston, I was in New England area. And I visited New York, I visited Harlem. I actually went to a masjid where I was stopped because I was not black. Can you imagine? It literally happened. I was walking to the masjid, and literally an African American brother stopped me. Hey, hold on, brother, hold on there. Where are you heading to? What are you up to? I said, I'm going to, this is a masjid, right? I want to pray here. You a Muslim? I'm like, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And he said, oh, that's surprising, brother. Welcome, come in. So I was thinking, it's possible that this brother, or these brothers, they became Muslim partially because of the influence of Malcolm X in that area. So he said, all praise is due to Allah that I went to Boston when I did. If I hadn't, I'd probably still be brainwashed black Christian. So, you know, the Lansing area, that state, the southern parts of America, at that time was just, it gives no hope to black people at all. They will think this is our fate, this is who we are. And they started hating themselves. And Malcolm X, I was showing the video, he later would say to his attendees in his temples, who taught you to hate yourself? Right? They accused him of being a hate teacher. They accused him of being a hate preacher. But he said, before they accused us of being hateful, who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate your hairstyle so much that you dye your hair? Who taught you to hate your skin color so much that you don't want to be around each other? Right? He started to develop this sense of a distinct perspective when he went to Boston, when he saw a different world. And later on, he went to Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, and he was only 15 years old. So there were a lot of black people, and many of them were, you know, on the street, so-called hustlers. They were doing things that would be deemed illegal by the officials, but were super common, too common in that time and in that community. So his half-sister Ella, of course, wanted an honest job for him. And an honest job at that time for the black people would be washing dishes or working in a fast food restaurant. And he didn't want any of those. There is always this desire for liberty and freedom inside Malcolm X. He started just going around, meeting people, learning from people. He did many different jobs. He was once a shoe shiner, right? He would do shoe shine business, and he learned all the tricks to get more money from the white people, the things to say, the facial expressions to have, the language to use. And he also did. He also worked in trains sometimes to be, like a waiter. He would serve food. He would ask, "Do you want anything?" And he knew how to get money as well. So he worked many different jobs. Sometimes I was thinking, if a person who was at once doing all of these jobs that sometimes people despise. Of course, there's no reason to despise these jobs, but you know, middle-class people, sometimes they despise these jobs. If somebody who was once at that position eventually can become who Malcolm X became, then what is the reason for you to lose hope for the future? What is the reason for you to say that I am up to no good? What excuse do you have to stop developing yourself and stop making yourself better and pursuing what you're actually good at and pursuing something that is beneficial to the community? This is what we can learn from Malcolm X. He was a shoe shiner, he was a waiter on a train, but he didn't stop pursuing greatness when he had the chance to. There's always a greater Malcolm inside him, and we should also recognize that greater ourselves inside ourselves. Never be content with who you are. Never be complacent about what you can do. You can always do more. You never know. Just keep trying. And eventually Malcolm felt that these jobs, shoe shining and being waiter in a train, doesn't earn much, especially because he started getting into some bad habits. he started taking drugs. He started being very alcoholic. He liked to drink alcohol. He started being addicted to the so-called what kind of dancing? I forgot. It was very popular in no, it was very popular in Boston at the time, and there were like big, huge halls just for people to dance, and it was a popular entertainment. He got very addicted to that. He used to do that a lot, and this also became the way he would meet women, and he was not a very disciplined person in terms of interaction with opposite gender at this time. So he spent a lot of money on these illegal things and these harmful things that he would later realize. But at this time, he was just enjoying his life, being just like everyone else. And he said, money is not coming quick enough. I need more money. I need quicker money. So he started getting into crimes, started getting into what he called hustling. At first, it was small. It was small trickeries, small, cons, small deceptive ways of making money. And later on, it became robbery. It became a theft. It became actually breaking into the door robbery. And this was the time when he was, you can say, the darkest time of his life, the lowest point of his life. So in 1946, so he was born in 1946, he's only 21 years old. 21 years old. Malcolm tries to retrieve a stolen $1,000 watch from a pawn shop and is arrested and charged with grand larceny, which is theft, breaking and entering, and firearms possession. He is convicted, and along with Jarvis, which he called Shorty, right, a close friend of his, but also a criminal, receives an 8 to 10 year sentence. And he's very funny, subhanAllah. When he wrote his autobiography, all of this have already happened, right? But he has such a good memory, such a strong memory. He remembers the name of every person he encountered, sometimes even a person that he just had one drink with. He remembers their name, he remembers their personality, he remembers how they look, and he remembers the detailed proceedings of things happening. For example, in his court case, he mentioned that there were several crimes, right? Several charges: breaking into homes, theft, possession of firearms without a license, and they were even charged of rape, although it was not established because the so-called victims were actually their girlfriends, and these white women had the decency to say, "I deny that. They didn't rape us. We were hanging out. We were just dating." But they were charged of many crimes, and the judge will say, count 1, 8 to 10 years, count 2, 8 to 10 years, count 3, 8 to 10 years. But all of this meant the highest is 8 to 10 years. But Shorty, or Jarvis, his friend, didn't understand. He was counting 8 to 10 years, 8 to 10 years to 20 years, 8 to 10 years, 30 years. He counted 100 years, and he literally fainted after the judge said immediately execution. He fainted, and Malcolm X mentioned this in his autobiography. So he remembers all of these humorous incidents, and he was very positive about this. He was so honest. I read another book about Malcolm X other than his autobiography. The author called his life a life of self-invention. So he was never afraid to face who he really is. He was never afraid to talk about him as he was before. He didn't shy away from any truth. He didn't hide who he was. He would mention, and he would talk about himself as if that is a person he hates so much. He was so painfully honest about who he was. He would talk about the crimes he did. He would talk about the disgusting practices and behaviors he used to have. And this is different from the Islamic principle. So in Islam, we had our sins, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "My ummah is safe except for those who boast about their sins. As long as you don't go out there and tell people what I did, which is wrong, you are safe. You will be forgiven." But the thing is, this was before he was a Muslim, right? So to talk about this was him talking about his jahiliyyah, and this was not prohibited. Actually, we have narration from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ that after Fajr prayer, they used to sit, they remember Allah, they do some dhikr, and they would start talking about their jahiliyyah. They would start talking about, brother, do you remember when we were in Mecca, before we were Muslims, we used to do this, we used to do that. We used to be so shameful in this action. And they said the Prophet ﷺ would listen to them and smile. He would smile. And Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh said, "I fear there would come a time when people only know Islam and they don't know what jahiliyyah is like." So there is value in this time of ignorance, because without the knowledge of the time of ignorance, you couldn't really appreciate Islam. You couldn't even appreciate how much value and benefit Islam has brought you. So to Malcolm X, this reflection on who he was a valuable step towards appreciating Islam and really being totally committed and submitted to Islam. So he was painfully honest when he talked about himself. And that's why when you read his book, you really feel you are seeing this person. There's a visual impact because of the details presented, right? Hearing about a person, hearing me talking about Malcolm X is 500% different from reading the book that he wrote in his own words. It's totally different from he describing himself. When I was reading this book, subhanAllah, I could feel that this has become my imaginary friend. I could feel that I was going to Harlem, sitting down and having a conversation with Malcolm X, right? And it became a part of my motivation for Jannah, right? I want to see this person in Jannah, I want to talk to him. I want to hear him say by any means necessary. I want to hear him say that. So that's why I strongly recommend you to read the book, even if you can watch videos, you can watch documentary, you can watch a movie about him. It's different. The experience is different. When you read the book, you feel a personal connection. You feel you're very close to this person. Okay, moving on. So 21 years old. He was charged to multiple 8 to 10 years, right? And he was sent to prison. Actually, at the age of 20, Malcolm is sent to jail in Charlestown, Massachusetts, and assigned prisoner number 22843. He will remain behind bars until 1952, 6 years. 6 years in prison. And do you know what is his... so he had multiple nicknames in his life, right? When he first got to Boston, he was called Homeboy. Homeboy. And then later on, he was called Detroit Red because he would dye his hair to be red. He was called Detroit Red. And later on, in prison, he had another nickname which you totally wouldn't imagine, based on his later life. Can you guess what his nickname in prison? Can you guess? He had a nickname in prison which his inmates gave him. He's called Satan. He's called Shaitan in prison because of his attitude towards religion. He was so anti-religion. He was so against all kinds of religious preaching that, and he used to be, they used to send chaplain, a Christian priest, to him. They do the common song, this is time for you to repent to God and come back to God, and God still loves you, and you just serve your time and you can still be a good person. And he would start cursing this person with the worst language he can imagine. He would hurt himself by banging on the doors, banging the bars, violently breaking the laws, and he would be, sent to, what's that called? Isolated area, isolation, but he would shout worst language you can imagine against God and against religion. That's why even these murderers, even these robbers called him Satan. They were afraid of him. He was so violent and he was so negatively passionate, you can say. But this period of, and he said, he said one of the worst things that human beings can do to other human beings is to put them behind bars. He said, I have no problem with imprisonment. You can keep me in a room, but I don't like bars. And he said he asked many inmates, this is the thing they cannot stand. Being behind bars is a constant reminder that your freedom has been taken away. There's no, you don't have 1 second where you even imagine you're free. The bars are there to remind you that you cannot go out. So he hated the bars. And he's transferred a few times from one prison to another. And eventually, of course, after some time, he would become used to it, and he would be less violent, and he would be more, used to the life in prison. But as I said, there's always this freedom inside Malcolm. He's never a content person. He's never said, okay, this is my life, I'll just live with it. He's never a person of, I'll just live with it. He's always, eager to do something more. He's always eager to explore. Even in this context, in this situation, what can I do? What is the best thing for me to do? And in Norfolk prison in Massachusetts, he met a fellow convict he calls Bimbi, which is a nickname. Bimbi, another black person. And I will read this passage as well. Page 157. So this person is elder, so older than Malcolm, and a quite wise man, right? So he said, the first man I met in prison who made any positive impression on me whatsoever was a fellow inmate, Bimbi. I met him in 1947, so he's 22 years old, right? 22 years old. At Charlestown, he was a light, kind of white freckles. red complexioned Negro. And by the way, Negro is different from the other N word. It's not offensive word in that society. As I was about my height and he had freckles. Bimbi, an old-time burglar, had been in many prisons. In a license plate shop where our gang, so they used to do some labor work in prison, right? So they were workmates. They used to work together and they used to talk a lot. Bimbi was the first Negro convict I'd known who didn't respond to "What ya know, daddy?" as if everybody would respond to this, but he didn't respond to this. Often after we had done our day's license plate quota, we would sit around, perhaps 15 of us, and listen to Bimbi. Normally, white prisoners wouldn't think of listening to Negro prisoners' opinions on any matter, but guards even would wander over close to hear Bimbi on any subject. So Malcolm, for the first time, started appreciating the value of knowledge and the power of knowledge. These people, even the guards, are coming close to this Bimbi, this older black person, because he had knowledge, because of the way he speaks. And this is a power that Malcolm was unfamiliar with. When he was in Boston, when he was in Harlem, the only power he knew was money. And the only power he knew was firearms. The only power he knew was knowing a lot of people, gangsters. That was the power he knew. But now he started appreciating the power of knowledge. He would have a cluster of people gravitate often and odd subjects you never would think of. He would prove to us, deeply into the science of human behavior, that the only difference between us and the outside people was that we had been caught. So basically, he would give a lot of public speeches, you can say, in a small scale. But everything he speaks made an impression of Malcolm X, and he also started trying to be like him. What if I read more? What if I know more? I could also be wise. I can think of things from multiple perspectives. Maybe I can also gain some respect in the way that Bimbi gained respect. And this person told him that the only way we knew how to rival was to cram some knowledge into our brains. He said, without knowledge, you will always be controlled. You will always be under people. They will always manipulate you. You have to enlighten yourself with knowledge. And actually, before Malcolm got in touch with Islam, or the nation of Islam, his family is first, his siblings, four of whom, so before Malcolm, four of his siblings converted to Islam, although not the Orthodox version, the Nation of Islam version, and they started introducing him to the Nation of Islam's leader, Elijah Muhammad, which later would become a very important figure in his life, who is himself in prison for many years, Elijah Muhammad. And the two men corresponded. So Malcolm X started writing letter to Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad would respond to his letters. And to Malcolm X at that time as a prisoner, Elijah Muhammad's letters are just so inspiring and so liberating and so empowering to him. And he started feeling like this man is truly, because Elijah Muhammad claimed to be messenger of Allah. And he didn't know better, so Malcolm really believed and firmly supported that he is the messenger of Allah. Later on, for many years, in his speech, he would constantly say that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us. This is his constant slogan. So in 1952, and by the way, in prison, right after he witnessed the respect that Bimbi had, and after, especially when his siblings started writing letters to him, and he felt that I want to reply, but I don't know too many vocabulary. He said, subhanAllah, the working vocabulary when he first got into prison was less than 100. And you can see the language, and he used the language in the early part of the book. He said, he wouldn't even say you understand, he would say you dig, like the street language, you dig? And, oh, he really schooled me, man. He's not even taught me, he schooled me. So this kind of street language. But when he was in prison, he started feeling that I need more knowledge. Even if I want to reply letters to my siblings, I need more knowledge. And what did he do? He took a dictionary from the prison's library, and he started reading from letter A, okay, from the index of A. He started reading every word under A, and he would memorize the definitions. Apple, what is apple? He would copy on a pad. He would write down on a pad, and he finished A, he started with B, and eventually he finished copying the whole dictionary from A to Z, every single word. And that is why we are so amazed by his command of vocabulary in his later speeches. Nobody can surpass his use of language. He would say things like, and I'm just mimicking, he would say things like, Our African brothers and sisters have already liberated themselves from the economic exploitation, social degradation, racial elimination. You know, a lot of 8 Asian words, just out of spur, without thinking, right? And he would use words like words that I have to look up in a dictionary when I watch his videos, deep philosophical words. So he gained this knowledge by copying a dictionary, and he had that willpower and determination. And as he learned more words, he was able to read books. So later on, he would tell, and this is, subhanAllah, really a common feature of all the great people, in Islam or outside Islam. If you are a great person, 99.9999% of the time you are a reader. You really like to read. Malcolm X started to read, and the more he reads, the more he enjoyed reading. He read on every single topic he could find. He almost finished the library. He would borrow books, take back to his cell, and he said the sentence that I hate the most at that time was lights out. Because when lights out, he couldn't read anymore. But he said, luckily, my cell was next to a corridor light. So when lights out, he would literally sit on the floor next to the bars and reach out his hand to get the corridor light and continue to read. For many days, for many years, he would read like this. He read on human history, he read on philosophy, he read Nietzsche and Kant. He read about different civilizations. He wrote. There was one page. Let me tell you, 177, and he said himself that when I had progressed to really serious reading every night at about 10 p.m., I would be outraged with the lights out. It always seemed to catch me right in the middle of something engrossing. Even the word engrossing is deep enough. All right. When I had fortunately, right outside my door was a corridor light that cast a glow into my room. The glow was enough to read by. Once my eyes adjusted to it, so when lights out came, I would sit on the floor where I could continue reading in that glow. At 1 hour intervals, the night guards paced past every room. Each time I heard the approaching footsteps, I jumped into bed and feigned sleep, pretend to be sleeping. And as soon as the guard passed, I got back out of bed onto the floor area of that light glow where I would read for another 58 minutes until the guard approached again. 58 minutes. He was so accurate about when the guard will come, and he was so stingy with the time to read, right? He would cherish the time to read. That went on until 3 or 4 every morning. He slept at 3 or 4 every morning. He read for 3-4 hours, actually 5-6 hours. 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night was enough for me. Often in the years in the streets, I have slept less than that. He started reading a lot, and just to show you what the depth of knowledge and the width of knowledge that he obtained in this time. He would later jokingly say to reporters that I got my master's degree in prison. He would say that my alma mater was books. He said in page 181, I'll quickly read a passage that he wrote based on what he wrote what he read in prison, right? He said, I listen today to the radio and watch television and read the headlines about the collective white man's fear and tension concerning China. When the white man professes ignorance about why the Chinese hate him so, my mind can't help flashing back to what I read. They're in prison about how the blood forebears of this same white man raped China at a time when China was trusting and helpless. Those original white Christian traders sent into China millions of pounds of opium. By 1839, so many, and by the way, this was written maybe 10 years later, but he remembered the year because of what he read 10 years ago. Is that in 1839, so many of the Chinese were addicts that China's desperate government destroyed 20,000 chests of opium. The first Opium War was promptly declared by the white man. Imagine declaring war upon someone who objects to being narcotized. The Chinese were severely beaten with Chinese-invented gunpowder. The Chinese were severely beaten with Chinese-invented gunpowder. The Treaty of Nanking made China pay the British white man for the destroyed opium, forced open China's major ports to British trade, forced China to abandon Hong Kong, fixed China's import tariffs so low that cheap British articles soon flooded in, may mean China's industrial development. So all of this historic knowledge was learned in prison, and he had very, cogent and very spot on arguments and comments about things that are far away from him, unrelated to him at all, the situation of China. But later on, he actually said that he has a lot of respect for Chairman Mao Zedong, and the Red China, what he called the Red China, not the New China, but the Red China. He said, I had a lot of respect for the Red China. Why? Because they didn't give in to the white power. They were severely beaten by the white, but no, we don't want your help. We are People's Republic of China, and until today, China doesn't accept foreigners to join the Chinese nationality. There's no foreign Chinese national, right? So it has become something of a proud identity. And he said, I respect them. Anyway, so he read a lot, he learned a lot, and then when he learned a lot, he wanted to practice his knowledge, right? Not only contain that inside. What did he do? He joined debates. He joined the debate team in prison. And he would debate on all kinds of topics, and he said, every time I got a topic, I would research in that field, right? I would read more books to get more knowledge. And the most interesting debate that he ever did was about religion. It was about Christianity, right? Page 193. So he said a Harvard student who is studying, I think, divinity or something like that, studying religion, would come and preach to the inmates about, spreading the good word, preaching about Christianity. So 193, once he was listening, and now Malcolm is not the street Malcolm anymore. He's not the Detroit Red anymore. Now he is a fighter with knowledge and passion. So this seminar started introducing Paul. Started introducing, who is it? Let me see. Paul, yes, he was introducing Paul as a prophet or as a saint in Christianity. So he was talking about how great he is and how important he is in Christianity. And finally, I put up my hand. There was a Q&A session. I put up my hand. He nodded. He had talked about Paul. I stood up and asked, what color was Paul? And I kept talking with pauses. He said, he had to be black because he was a Hebrew. And the original Hebrews were black, weren't they? He had started flushing red, the way white people do. He said, yes. I wasn't through yet. What color was Jesus? He was Hebrew too, wasn't he? Both the Negro and the white convicts had sat bolt upright, like they were just shining. What happened here? I don't care how tough the convict, be he brainwashed black Christian or a devil white Christian, neither of them is ready to hear anybody saying Jesus wasn't white. Because it has become like a cultural concept that Jesus is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white person that you see normally in church paintings and sculpture, right? This has imprinted into their mind. But he said, what color was Jesus? The instructor walked around. He shouldn't have felt bad. In all of the years since, I never have met any intelligent white man who would try to insist that Jesus was white. How could they? He said, Jesus was brown. I let him get away with that compromise. So the Daisy people should be happy. So this already shows his ability to argue. Right? He made a point by asking question. What color was Jesus? He was Hebrew, wasn't he? And he would use this a lot in his later speeches. He asked questions that cannot be answered. But he can always answer questions that other people ask him. SubhanAllah, he is really one of a kind narrator, orator, and a speaker. All right, moving on. 196. I just want to quickly, because I have maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes left. When he was released from prison eventually, after 6 years of imprisonment, Helda, a sibling of his, the next morning gave me some money to put in my pocket. Before I left, I went out and bought 3 things. I remember well. He remembered the 3 things he bought. I bought a better looking pair of eyeglasses. Better than the pair the prison had issued to me, and I bought a suitcase and a wristwatch. I think these 3 things are very symbolic. You can tell what a person he has become by the 3 things he bought. He bought a pair of eyeglasses, that's how much he reads and how much he needs to read. He bought a suitcase, that is meant I'm not set to work. I got things to do. I will not just hang around anymore. It's not about the street anymore. I got work to do. And the 3rd thing, I got a wristwatch. I got to be careful with my time now. He started to be very conscious about his mission, about his responsibility as a learned, as a knowledgeable and aware and conscious black man. in that whitewashed American society. He started working towards the liberty and uplifting of black people. All right, moving on. 198. So now he had been corresponding with Elijah Muhammad and other members of Nation of Islam in prison. He already established and developed an admiration towards this organization. You know, they are so cool. When they talk so truthfully. To him, it was like really impressive. So the first thing, of course, once he was relieved from the prison, he wants to meet people from Nation of Islam. He wants to join this organization that gave him power and inspiration when he was in prison. So he went and he met Elijah Muhammad, and it was really, for him, it was a religious moment, right? When he met Elijah Muhammad, it was like meeting the messenger of Allah. From his perspective, he cried a lot, and right, he said, "You are the person who changed me. Your letters changed who I am." And he was very sincere when he did that. And very soon he started trying to contribute to this Nation of Islam. And very soon he started showcasing his talents. He's not just another normal black person. He is very knowledgeable, very conscious, and very militant. He's ready to fight. He's a Black Panther. So he was very impressed by the community, and this is something we can learn. Okay? For example, if we have mainland Chinese who recently migrated to Hong Kong for work, came to Hong Kong, and he started asking about Muslims, right? And I tell him, if you want to know more about Islam, please come to MCHK on Friday for Friday talks. You will learn more. And now this person will come to Muslim Council of Hong Kong, and what we show here will be Islam to him, right? Our community as a collective body, what we show is Islam. You like it or not, we're representing Islam to this person. So Malcolm X went to this Nation of Islam, and what he saw really impressed him. What did he see? First of all, every person is very elegantly dressed, diligent, very immaculately dressed, spotless, beautiful, sharp, handsome, right? This shows the dignity of black people. And he said the greetings. Even the children would say to each other, "Assalamu alaikum," peace be upon you. This was impressive to him, as compared, in contrast to what he was used to, the greetings on the street. "What channel, daddy? You dig, homeboy? Got something to school me?" Something like that. That's their greeting. But now it's "Assalamu alaikum," peace be upon you. Brothers, and he said the way they call each other, it's not homeboy anymore. It's not red anymore. It's not hustler anymore, right? Even America, in the modern day America, a lot of black people refer to each other in a not so respectful manner, and they think it's normal, right? Yeah. They started calling each other brother and sister, and this is very respectful. Sir and madam, Sir Malcolm X, Minister Malcolm X. This was the title later on for him, and Brother Malcolm X. The respect, the human dignity he felt was something very different. And he also found the self-discipline of these people. They stayed away from alcohol. Of course, alcohol is haram. But this nation, as a cult, they stayed away from many things that are halal. They didn't drink coffee, I think. They stayed away from coffee because they think caffeine is a way of controlling the black people. It's a plot. They think of it as a strategy from the white man. They were very disciplined, and they had very strict rules in the nation. If you do something bad, you have to be isolated for a period of time. For example, if you drank alcohol for the first time, you'll be isolated for 30 days. Like, no member of the nation can talk to you. It is a rule. And if you drink again, you'll be basically expelled from the nation. So this cult was, although many of the things were not from Islam, but it was quite powerful, and that's why it expanded and developed so fast. And it was because this Nation of Islam caught very accurately on what black people needed at the time. The black people needed a representative for them to hate the white man, to give them a reason to hate the white man, to give them a valid argument to hate the white man. And Malcolm X, let me tell you some of the heterodox, basically the wrong ideas that Nation of Islam presented in the name of Islam, okay? They said that God is black. They said that God is a person and he is black. They said that the original men were black. This is true. We believe that Adam alayhi salam was in dark color because he was made of dark clay. They said that the original men were black, but they said more. There were no white people in the beginning. Everyone was black. white people were invented by an evil black scientist. It's like a fiction movie. So an evil black scientist one day wants to invent some kind of a monster. Let's invent white men. So that's their ideology. And they were taught that all white men are devil without exception. Every single white person is devil without exception. And Malcolm X firmly believed that for many years. You know why? Because in that society at that time, they asked a very simple question to Malcolm. Can you think of any white man that you've ever met in your life who has not harmed you in some way? He cannot think of any. Everyone that he's met. And even he said, well, you know, there was a Jewish person who offered me a job, offered me a good job, and I was earning money from him. And he said, do you think he is good to you when he offers you $500 for him to make 1,000? It's another way of exploitation and manipulation. So from there, he said, no, it's true. I cannot think of one single white person who has ever done any good for me, right? Who has not manipulated me in that society. So he firmly believed this, and he preached this, that all white men are devils, right? And this is the judgment time. They believe this is the judgment day, that since Elijah Muhammad is here, since Allah has revealed to Elijah Muhammad that now the original people, the real men, the black men, are supposed to rise up and separate from the devils and have their own state. They were segregationists. Nation of Islam was segregationist, which means they didn't want to integrate into the American society. They proposed segregation, that white people and black people should be entirely segregated. You have your own state, we have our own state. You have your government, we have our government. You have your president, we have our president, right? That's what Malcolm X firmly believed in and proposed. Of course, later on he changed, but at this time he was firm on that. And also, 245, he started preaching on behalf of Elijah Muhammad. Sorry, I'm feeling hot. Talking about Malcolm X makes me hot.
You're alive, bro.
He's a Black Panther, so
There's 10 people watching.
it's two.
So you make out the black coat.
Black coat as well.
All right. So he started preaching on behalf of Elijah Muhammad. He would always say that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. And he would, you know, the message is simple, but the way he says it is very catchy and very, very touching to the black people. I'll show you a short video right now, okay? Some of you might have watched this, but just a 3-minute short video. He said that deprives the government of revenue. If we don't gamble, we don't cheat, we don't steal, they have no money to make. Listen to why this is the case.
Because you can't get into a whiskey bottle without getting past the government seal. You can't open a deck of cards without getting past the government seal.
So all of these things that he mentioned, whiskey, so alcohol, cigarette, you know, cards, and you know, even casinos, all of this pay heavy tax to the government. This is a large source of revenue for the government. Even today, why is Las Vegas so important? It's paying a heavy tax to the government So he said you cannot buy a bottle of whiskey without paying the government. So he said,
White man makes the whiskey and then puts you in jail for getting drunk.
the white man mixed the whiskey and put you in prison for getting drunk.
He sells you the cards and the dice and puts you in jail when you use them. So he's against us because we fix it where he can't catch you anymore. We take the dice out of your hands and the cards out of your hands and the whiskey out of your head. The most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. And as Muslims, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us to respect our women and to protect our women. And the only time a Muslim really gets real violent is when someone goes to molest his woman. We will kill you for our woman. I'm making it plain, yes. We will kill you for our woman. We believe that if the white man will do whatever is necessary to see that his woman gets respect and protection, then you and I will never be recognized as men until we stand up like men and place the same penalty over the head of anyone who puts his filthy hands out to put in the direction of our women.
So, later I want to read the eulogy in the end. Can I take another 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So later on, there was an actor called what's his name? Something Davis. He wrote the eulogy of Malcolm X, and he said he spoke very well. He said Malcolm is our manhood. He made us men. So before this, the black people of America, they were unsatisfied. They were unhappy. They knew they were oppressed. But they were too used to this long history of oppression that they've got immobile and dysfunctional against this system. But Malcolm is the first one to bravely stand up and say that yes, we are peaceful and we are respectful and we are polite and we follow the law. But if they lay their hands on you, you make sure they don't see tomorrow. He had that militancy. That courage, and he, once he proposed, or how to say, he proposed the setting up of rifle clubs. He said black men should have rifle clubs. You should own guns. So the government said, aren't you then proposing for violence? Aren't you proposing for, conflict, armed conflict? He said, if you have gone through and have been put into the situation of the black people in America have been put through, you would want a gun yourself. So he defended all the rights and he defended all the things that the white people don't want them to do, but he says we have a right to do and we need to do. I'll give you an example. It's such a powerful speech, and later on you can go to YouTube and watch many of his speeches. So on this one, later on, I want to make this short. So when he started contributing to Nation of Islam and showcased his talents, of course, he became more and more popular because of his speaking skills, right? More and more people started coming to listen to him speak. And he was also very passionate on fishing, what he called fishing, going out on the street and being very approachable. Go to those black neighborhoods and he would say, hey brother, who taught you to hate yourself? He would actually tell people like that. Hey brother, what benefit do you get from that bottle of alcohol? What can you be a better person because of that alcohol? And he will go there, brother, what job are you doing? Who gave you that job? And who asked you to do what you do? And who are you serving by doing that job? So he was awakening the black people. He was making them feel and understand and open eyes to the reality, which is we are being used. We are being taken advantage of. And it's time for us to stand up and to wake up. And when he started preaching this, and he started preaching, of course, all the white men are devils, and we shouldn't cooperate with them, all of those. And even he criticized people like Dr. Martin Luther King, because these people, to him, are just bourgeois integrationists who are like spies of white people, right? Because they want to integrate. Dr. Martin Luther King is, I have a dream. And Malcolm X laughed at this. You can keep dreaming, they will never fulfill your dream. He actually said this. You keep on dreaming, I'm not on your side. I'm the person who will do things to get what I have, to get what I should have. and what I deserve to have, instead of standing on a pulpit and preaching about my dream for what I should have. I started to sound like him, I think, a little bit. All right, so
You are mimicking like him, right?
so on television, eventually he got more popular. Many people, even the white journalists and TV stations, radio programs started inviting him and asking him questions, tough questions. But he never disappointed people in his answers. So one, Mr. Malcolm X, why do you teach black supremacy and hate? You see, tough question. A red flag waved for me. He said, something chemical happened inside me every time I heard that. When we Muslims had talked about the devil white man, he had been relatively abstract. Someone we Muslims really actually came into contact with. But now here was that devil in the flesh, on the phone, with all of his calculating, cold-eyed, self-righteous tricks, and nerve and gall. The voices questioning me became to me as breathing, living devils. So he started replying. The white man so guilty of white supremacy can't hide his guilt by trying to accuse the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of teaching black supremacy and hate. All Mr. Muhammad is doing is trying to uplift the black man's mentality and the black man's social and economic condition in this country. The guilty, two-faced white man can decide what he wants. Our slave foreparents would have been put to death for advocating so-called integration with the white man. Now when Mr. Muhammad speaks of separation, the white man calls us hate teachers and fascists. The white man doesn't want the blacks. He doesn't want the blacks that are a parasite upon him. He doesn't want this black man whose presence and condition in this country expose the white man to the word for what he is. So why do you attack Mr. Muhammad? And for the white man to ask the black man if he hates him, this is the gold part. For the white man to ask the black man if he hates him, it's just like the rapist asking the raped, or the wolf asking the sheep, do you hate me? The white man is in no moral position to accuse anyone else of hate. Why? When all of my ancestors are snake bitten and I'm snake bitten, and I warn my children to avoid snakes, what does that snake sound like accusing me of hate teaching? You see his unapologetic arguments. Basically, in simple words, is that you caused this. You caused the conflict. You resulted in our situation, and now you are blaming us for the situation. You made us lose our voice, and now you are frightened because we're getting back our voice. You took away what we should have, and now you're frightened because we're taking back what we should have. That's his point, right? That's his argument. And he would talk on televisions, public debate, in colleges, in universities. He got very popular, and there's no time to finish the long story. But eventually, the timeline goes to, I want to talk about, I think there needs to be a part 2.
You want to be a part 2? I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, maybe let's do a part 2. Because the Hajj is very important.
Yes.
When he went for Hajj and changed his mind.
You haven't talked about his
His true Muslim life,
Yes.
which is, although it's relatively short, and subhanAllah, this is not the only famous Muslim we know who turned to Allah in a sincere and real manner, very close to their death. This is not the only one. This is actually Allah's, according to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if Allah loves a person, He beautifies his ending, right? He beautifies his death. So Malcolm X came back from Hajj, and next year he died. And we know a person who came from Hajj is clean as a baby. So Malcolm, despite his crimes in the past, he came back from Hajj and he was assassinated. يُقَاتِلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. He was killed in the path of Allah. Who can be better than him? So okay, I'm just gonna end with a little bit to attract you to the second part of this talk, inshallah. I want to read the eulogy that O.C. Davis wrote for Malcolm X. You know what is a eulogy, right? It's a speech at his funeral. He read, here, at this final hour, in this quiet place, Harlem has come to bid farewell to one of its brightest hopes, extinguished now, and gone from us forever. Many will ask what Harlem find to honor in this stormy, controversial, and bold young captain, and we will smile. They will say that he is of hate, a fanatic, a racist, who can only bring evil to the cause for what you struggle. And we will answer and say unto them, did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? Did he ever do a mean thing? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance? For if you did, you would know him. And if you knew him, you would know why we must honor him. Malcolm was our manhood, our living black manhood. This was his meaning to his people. And in honoring him, we honor the best in ourselves. And we will know him then for what he was and is, a prince, our own black shining prince, who didn't hesitate to die because he loved us so. This is the eulogy, very beautiful eulogy. And next time, inshallah, I'll talk about how he became a true Muslim and how he raptured with Nation of Islam, started his own organization, became more independent, and eventually died as a martyr. So stay tuned, and inshallah, see you next time.
People saying already yes, part 2.
جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
My Allah is the one.